Darius Morris couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It had been 3 months since his honorable discharge from military intelligence, and civilian life felt hollow, not because he missed the service, but because the patterns he'd been tracking hadn't stopped. The first sign came 6 months ago: unusual atmospheric disturbances over remote regions, perfectly timed to coincide with global communications blackouts. His superiors had dismissed his concerns as satellite malfunctions or natural phenomena, but Darius knew better. 15 years analyzing threat patterns had taught him to trust his instincts. "You're being paranoid again," said his sister Vivian as she set down a cup of coffee in front of him. Her apartment had become his temporary refuge while he figured out his next move. Probably, he admitted, though he didn't believe it. On his tablet, he scrolled through news reports: unexplained power outages, wildlife behaving erratically, and most disturbing, people vanishing only to reappear days later with no memory of their absence. But doesn't it seem strange that no one's connecting these incidents? "The world's always been full of strange happenings," Vivian said, heading for the door. "Not everything is a conspiracy. I've got a double shift at the hospital. There's leftover pasta in the fridge." After she left, Darius continued his research. His military credentials still granted him access to certain databases, an oversight he wasn't eager to report. He cross-referenced incident locations with atmospheric anomalies and found a pattern that couldn't be coincidental. His phone buzzed. A text from his former colleague Jackson Tanner: "I found something, meet at the usual place, 2 hours, come alone." Jackson had been Darius's most trusted analyst, with an uncanny ability to find connections others missed. If he'd discovered something, it was worth investigating. The usual place was a small diner outside the city limits, chosen for its lack of surveillance cameras and noise level that made eavesdropping difficult. Darius arrived early, choosing a corner booth with a clear view of both exits. Jackson arrived looking haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervousness Darius had never seen in him before. "You look like hell," Darius said as Jackson slid into the booth. "Haven't slept in 3 days," Jackson replied, glancing around the diner before pulling out a small device and placing it on the table. It emitted a soft hum, a signal jammer. "What I'm about to tell you sounds insane, but I've verified it through multiple channels." "I'm listening." "They're here," Jackson said simply. "They've been here for months, maybe years, integrating so gradually that no one noticed." "Who's they?" Darius asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Not human," Jackson whispered. "I got reassigned to a classified project analyzing unusual tissue samples. The DNA, if you can even call it that, isn't from any known species on Earth." Darius felt a chill. Extraterrestrial. "That's the working theory, but here's where it gets worse." Jackson pulled out a small flash drive. These samples were taken from individuals in positions of power: a general, 2 senators, a tech CEO. They all exhibited anomalous brain activity followed by subtle behavioral changes. "Infiltration," Darius murmured. Jackson nodded. "The changes are so subtle that unless you knew what to look for, you'd never notice. They maintain their memories, habits, even their personalities mostly, but they're being influenced." "To what end?" "That's what I can't figure out. They're not destroying anything, not yet, just observing, gathering information, placing more of their kind in key positions." Jackson pushed the drive across the table. "Everything I've compiled is on here. I need you to take it. I'm being watched." As if on cue, the diner's door opened, and 2 men in dark suits entered. They looked ordinary enough, but something about their movement seemed off, too fluid, too coordinated. Jackson went pale. "They found me. Listen carefully, Darius. They're preparing for something big. The pattern suggests a coordinated action in major cities within the next month. You need to find Dr. Olivia Weiss at Princeton. She's developed a detection method. Tell her about the quantum resonance discrepancy. She'll understand." The men were moving toward their table now, hands inside their jackets. "Go," Jackson hissed. "I'll create a distraction. Don't trust anyone whose behavior changes even slightly." "I'm not leaving you." "You have to. This is bigger than either of us." Before Darius could argue further, Jackson stood up and deliberately knocked over a server carrying a tray of drinks. In the ensuing chaos, Darius pocketed the drive and slipped out the back exit. He made it to his car just as he heard shouting from inside the diner. Peeling out of the parking lot, he caught a glimpse of the men rushing out the front door in his rearview mirror. That night, Jackson's face appeared on the evening news. A tragic accident, they said. His car had veered off a bridge. No body recovered. Darius knew better. They had silenced Jackson, but not before he'd passed on critical information. The drive contained coordinates, data sets, and surveillance footage, all pointing to a coordinated alien presence establishing itself on Earth. One video clip showed a woman transforming, not physically, but something beneath her skin shifted, rippling like liquid metal before settling back into human form. The timestamp was from a week ago at a military installation. Darius packed a bag with essentials. If what Jackson had uncovered was true, nowhere was safe. Earth had been quietly invaded and very few people knew it. As he prepared to leave Vivian's apartment, his sister returned from her hospital shift. "You're leaving?" she asked, noticing the bag. "I need to follow up on something," he said carefully, studying her face for any signs of change. "I'll be gone for a few days." Vivian frowned. "Is this about your conspiracy theories again? Darius, you need to let it go. Find a job, move forward." Her concern seemed genuine, but Jackson's warning echoed in his mind. Don't trust anyone whose behavior changes even slightly. "I'll be careful," he promised, kissing her cheek. "Lock the doors behind me." As he drove toward Princeton to find Dr. Weiss, Darius realized that Earth had become a war zone, one where the enemy wore familiar faces, and most of humanity didn't even know they were under attack. The silent invasion had begun, and Darius might be one of the few people who could expose it before it was too late. Dr. Naomi Everett squinted at the microscopic anomaly on her screen. For the fifth time that evening, the cellular structure of her sample showed the same impossible behavior, reorganizing itself at the molecular level, adapting to the electrical stimulus in ways that defied biological science. "Quite the party trick," she muttered, adjusting her glasses and recording another observation in her journal. The Princeton University laboratory was empty at this late hour, just as she preferred. Fewer questions, fewer interruptions. The sample had arrived 3 weeks ago from an anonymous source, accompanied only by a note, "Not terrestrial, find the resonance." At first she dismissed it as a prank, but curiosity led her to run preliminary tests. What she discovered kept her working through nights and weekends since. The cellular structure possessed a quantum signature unlike anything in her extensive database. More alarmingly, it could mimic human tissue with near-perfect precision. A knock at the laboratory door startled her. Security wasn't due for another hour. "Dr. Weiss," a male voice called. Naomi froze. No one had called her by her maiden name in years, not since her divorce and return to using Everett professionally. Only her oldest colleagues knew her as Weiss. "Who's asking?" she responded, discreetly sliding her samples into a cooling chamber. The door opened to reveal a haggard-looking man in his 40s, with a military bearing despite his civilian clothes. "My name is Darius Morris. Jackson Tanner sent me to find you. He mentioned something about quantum resonance discrepancy." Naomi's breath caught. That term was from her classified paper, research she'd abandoned after the Department of Defense quietly asked her to discontinue it 2 years ago. "Jackson Tanner," she repeated. "Where is he?" "Dead," Morris said flatly, "or at least that's what they want everyone to believe." She gestured to a chair. "You'd better explain quickly. I have security protocols in place that will lock down this lab in exactly 7 minutes unless I enter an override." Morris pulled out a flash drive. "I need a secure terminal." Naomi hesitated only briefly before pointing to a standalone computer, one disconnected from the university network. As Morris transferred files, she maintained a safe distance, studying him. His movements were precise but human, natural micro-hesitations, the slight tremor of exhaustion, not like the two perfect specimens she'd been observing. "You've seen them too," Morris said, noticing her scrutiny. "The ones who aren't quite right." "I've been studying tissue samples," she confirmed, "but I haven't encountered an actual, whatever they are." "They look human," Morris explained, pulling up video footage. "But they're not. They've infiltrated key positions, military, government, corporations. The changes are subtle but increasing. Jackson believed they're preparing for something." Naomi watched the video of a woman whose skin rippled unnaturally. "This matches my findings. The cells can reconfigure on command, creating perfect mimicry, but they maintain a distinct quantum signature that our current technology can't easily detect." "Can you build something that could detect them?" Morris asked. "Theoretically." Naomi moved to a locked cabinet and withdrew a prototype device. "I've been developing this based on my research. It measures quantum field discrepancies in organic matter. It's crude, but it might work at close range." "How close?" 10 feet, maybe less," she hesitated, "but I need more data to calibrate it properly." Morris's expression darkened. "We might not have time for more research. Jackson discovered evidence of a coordinated action planned within the month." Naomi considered the implications. "I have contacts, other scientists who might help, people I trust." "Are you certain they're still themselves?" Morris challenged. The question hung between them. Naomi had no answer. She made a decision. I need 48 hours to finish this prototype and pack essential equipment. Then we need to move to my private lab outside the city. You have a private lab. My family has money, she said simply. And I've always been paranoid about intellectual property. It's remote, secure, and off-grid, perfect for what we need. The lab's overhead lights suddenly flashed red. What's happening? Morris tensed. Someone's accessing the building with high-level security clearance. Naomi quickly gathered her samples and the prototype. That's unusual at this hour. Morris checked the security feed on the computer. Two men and a woman in suits were entering the building, moving with that same unnerving coordination he'd seen before. We need to leave now, he ejected the flash drive. Is there another exit? Naomi nodded, grabbing a backpack from under her desk. Maintenance tunnel. I mapped all escape routes my first day here. They slipped into the tunnel just as footsteps approached the lab door. Naomi led the way through the dimly lit concrete passage, eventually emerging near the campus botanical gardens. My car's in the east lot, she whispered. Yours. West entrance, they'll be watching both. Then we walk. Naomi pulled out her phone and sent a text message. I have a student who asks no questions. He'll pick us up 3 blocks from here. 20 minutes later, they were in the back of a beat-up sedan driven by a young man with blue hair who nodded at Naomi's brief explanation about a research emergency. Where to, Dr. Eve? He asked. Train station, she decided, and then forget you ever saw us tonight, Marcus. Saw who? He replied with a grin, pulling away from the curb. As they drove, Naomi examined Morris's flash drive data on her tablet. This confirms everything I've suspected. The quantum signature is identical to my samples. So you can track them. Better? Naomi's eyes gleamed with determined focus. Given 48 hours at my facility, I can build a device that will not only detect them but disrupt their cellular cohesion, if they can't maintain human form. They can't hide, Morris finished. We could expose them. Precisely, but we'll need help distributing the technology. This is bigger than 2 people can handle. Morris nodded grimly. I have some former military contacts, people who might believe us with proof. Then that's our next step, Naomi said. Build the disruptor, gather allies, expose the infiltration. As the train station came into view, Naomi realized that her life's work had unexpectedly prepared her for this moment. Her research, once deemed too theoretical for practical application, might now be humanity's best defense. The resistance was rising quietly, determinedly, just as their enemy had infiltrated, step by careful step. Colonel Joaquin Reyes stood on the deck of the USS Vigilant, watching storm clouds gather on the horizon. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. A tempest was brewing on Earth as well, one that few could see coming. Sir, they've arrived, Lieutenant Patel reported, her posture rigid but her eyes betraying concern. How many? Reyes asked, still facing the darkening sky. 7 representatives in total. Russian, Chinese, British, Israeli, Indian, Brazilian, and Australian. Reyes nodded, and they came alone, no aides or security. As requested, sir. Good, have them escorted to the secure conference room. I'll be there shortly. As Patel departed, Reyes took a moment to gather his thoughts. 3 weeks ago, he would have dismissed anyone claiming alien infiltration as delusional. But that was before the incident in Manila, before he'd watched his second-in-command's face ripple like mercury when struck by an experimental EMP during a classified weapons test, before the creature that wasn't Captain Daniel Walsh anymore had nearly killed him. His hand unconsciously moved to the bandaged wound on his side. The doctors had been puzzled by the unusual cellular debris in the laceration. Reyes hadn't enlightened them. The secure conference room was deliberately austere, no windows, minimal furnishings, and completely isolated from external signals. The 7 military leaders seated around the table represented some of the most powerful armed forces on the planet. Thank you for coming, Reyes began without preamble. I know many of you risked your careers, possibly your lives, by answering my call without official sanction. General Zhao of the Chinese People's Liberation Army leaned forward. Your message was compelling, Colonel. Earth's sovereignty compromised by non-human entities. Either you've gone mad, or we face an unprecedented threat. I assure you I'm quite sane, Reyes replied, activating a secure tablet, though I questioned my own sanity at first. He played the video footage provided by Darius Morris, enhanced by Dr. Everett's laboratory analysis. The room fell silent as they watched humans transforming, revealing their inhuman nature. These were recorded over the past 3 weeks, Reyes explained. Locations include Washington, D.C., Beijing, Moscow, London, and 16 other major cities. This could be elaborate digital manipulation, General Petrov of Russia suggested, though his expression showed he didn't believe his own words. It's not, Reyes said, and you all know it. Each of you was invited here because you reported unusual behavior among high-ranking officials in your respective commands. Officials who suddenly reversed long-held positions, who canceled crucial security protocols, who began advocating for reduced military readiness. The Australian admiral nodded grimly. Our defense minister ordered 3 of our naval bases to run at minimal staffing last week, called it a cost-saving exercise. When I questioned it, I was nearly relieved of command. Similar confirmations came from around the table. Positions compromised, critical systems vulnerable, communications monitored. Their strategy is clear, Reyes continued. They're systematically dismantling our ability to respond to a coordinated attack. Based on intel from our sources, we believe this attack is imminent within the next 10 days. What exactly are we dealing with? Asked the British Air Marshal. Reyes gestured to the woman who had been silently observing from the corner of the room. Dr. Naomi Everett has been studying these entities. She's our leading expert. Naomi approached the table, her fatigue evident after weeks of non-stop work. They're not biological as we understand the term. Their cellular structure exists in a state of quantum flux, allowing them to reorganize their molecular composition at will. They can perfectly mimic human appearance and even DNA on superficial scans. How do we fight them? General Sharma of India asked. We've developed this. Naomi placed a small device on the table. A quantum resonance disruptor. It forces their cellular structure to destabilize, revealing their true form and significantly weakening them. And killing them? General Petrov inquired. Sustained exposure appears fatal to them, she confirmed. But the device has limited range, about 50 meters now that we've improved the prototype. Reyes took over. We've manufactured 300 of these devices over the past week using Dr. Everett's specifications. Not enough for a global defense, but enough to protect key command centers and armed strike teams. What are you proposing, Colonel? General Zhao asked. A coordinated global operation, Reyes replied. Simultaneous deployment of these devices in major government and military installations worldwide, followed by immediate security protocols to identify and neutralize the imposters before they realize what's happening. You're talking about a military action on sovereign soil without governmental approval, the Brazilian commander observed. Many of our leaders may be compromised. Which is precisely why we must act independently, Reyes countered. This isn't about politics or national interests anymore. This is about human survival. A heavy silence fell over the room. How can we trust each other? General Petrov finally asked. Any one of us could be one of them. Naomi activated the disruptor in her hand. A soft blue light swept over the room. Everyone tensed, but no one transformed. You've all been scanned, she said. You're clean. Admiral Chen of the Israeli Navy spoke for the first time. My grandfather survived the Holocaust by acting when others wouldn't believe the evidence before their eyes. I will not make the same mistake. Israel stands with humanity. One by one, the others voiced their commitment. Ancient rivalries and political differences set aside in the face of extinction. Reyes outlined the plan: 12 hours to brief trusted officers, 24 hours to position teams and equipment, 48 hours to global deployment. Operation Disclosure would commence in 3 days. As they dispersed, Reyes received an urgent communication from Darius Morris. Multiple government channels suddenly encrypted with unknown protocol. Military exercises canceled worldwide. They know something's coming. Reyes sent a one-word reply: accelerate. The alliance had been forged just in time. Earth's defenders would have only one chance to reclaim their planet from an enemy already entrenched in the halls of power. The coming battle would determine the fate of humanity, a species that until recently hadn't even known it was at war. 6 months after Operation Disclosure, Tessa Lynn stood amid the ruins of what had once been downtown Seattle. The battle had left its scars, buildings partially collapsed, streets cratered, but unlike many global cities, Seattle had survived. Ms. Lynn, the community representatives are ready, said Fahim, her young assistant, tablet in hand. Tessa nodded, taking a deep breath before turning away from the devastation. Let's not keep them waiting. The makeshift council chamber had once been a public library, one of the few large structures left intact after the 3-day war that had exposed and largely defeated the alien infiltration. Books and knowledge seemed an appropriate backdrop for rebuilding civilization. Representatives from 20 local districts waited inside. Teachers, doctors, engineers, farmers, ordinary people thrust into leadership because they'd survived and were willing to help others do the same. "Thank you all for coming," Tessa began, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had made her the de facto civilian coordinator in the Pacific Northwest. Before the war, she'd been an environmental systems engineer, a profession that had proved unexpectedly valuable in crafting survival strategies for a damaged world. "I've just returned from the National Coordination Summit in Chicago," she continued. "I have updates on power grid restoration, agricultural planning, and the containment protocols." The mention of containment brought a tense silence. Everyone knew what it meant, the ongoing hunt for remaining infiltrators. "The quantum resonance scanners have been distributed to all major settlement areas," Tessa reported. "Colonel Reyes confirms that military sweeps have found fewer than 20 disguised entities in the past month, compared to hundreds daily during the initial conflict." Dr. Prakesh, who represented the medical coalition, raised his hand. "And the biological countermeasure, has Dr. Everett made progress?" "Yes," Tessa replied, allowing herself a small smile. "The airborne variant of the quantum disruptor has been successfully tested. Once deployed, it will permeate Earth's atmosphere for approximately 3 years, making it impossible for their cellular structure to maintain human form anywhere on the planet." Murmurs of relief spread through the assembly. "However," Tessa cautioned, "deployment is still weeks away. Until then, we maintain scanning protocols and curfews." The meeting continued with updates on immediate concerns: clean water systems, winter food stores, communication network repairs. Tessa addressed each methodically, the engineer in her finding comfort in solvable problems amid so much uncertainty. After the council dispersed, Tessa stayed behind to review resource allocation charts with Fahim. The tablet's battery died mid-discussion. "Sorry," he said, connecting it to their precious solar charger. "Power management still isn't my strong suit." "We're all adapting," Tessa replied kindly. Her communicator buzzed, one of the military-grade devices reserved for emergency coordination. Colonel Reyes' voice came through clearly despite the distance. "Ms. Lin, we have a situation requiring your expertise. One of their vessels has been located intact in the Olympic Peninsula. Dr. Everett believes it contains technological systems similar to your environmental work." "I'll prepare a team," she responded. "Expected arrival time." "Transport will reach you by 800 tomorrow. Bring only essential personnel. Raise out." Tessa stared at the communicator long after the connection ended. An intact alien vessel represented both opportunity and danger, technology that could help rebuild or secrets that could harm what remained of humanity. The next morning, a military helicopter transported Tessa and 2 trusted engineers to a heavily guarded forest clearing. The vessel wasn't what she'd expected, no classic flying saucer or intimidating warship. Instead, a sleek, organic-looking structure about the size of a small house nestled among massive evergreens, its surface shifting subtly like oil on water. Dr. Naomi Everett greeted them at the perimeter fence. The scientist looked different from her widely circulated images during the war, thinner, with streaks of premature gray in her dark hair, but her eyes remained intensely focused. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Lin," Everett said, leading them toward a mobile laboratory. "Your background in environmental systems is precisely what we need." Inside the lab, Darius Morris stood examining holographic projections. The former intelligence officer nodded at their arrival, but quickly returned to his analysis. "We've determined this isn't a combat craft," Everett explained. "It appears to be a terraforming module designed to gradually alter Earth's biosphere." Tessa felt a chill. "Alter it how?" "To make it more hospitable for them, less for us," Morris answered without looking up. "Atmospheric composition, soil bacteria, oceanic acidity, subtle changes that would have gone unnoticed until it was too late." "That's where you come in," Everett continued. "We need to understand if they activated any of these systems before we stop them, and if so, how to reverse the process." Tessa spent hours studying the vessel's control systems, which operated on principles that merged biology and technology in ways human science had never achieved. By evening, she had reached a conclusion that brought both relief and a new sense of purpose. They had barely begun the process, she reported to the assembled team. Only 3 release points worldwide, all now contained, but the technology itself, she paused, searching for words. "It's remarkable. Their environmental engineering is centuries beyond ours, maybe millennia." "Can we use it?" Colonel Reyes asked, having arrived during her investigation. With study and caution, yes, Tessa replied. This system was designed to transform an environment precisely and efficiently. We could adapt it to repair our own war-damaged ecosystems, restore radiation-contaminated zones, purify water systems, even begin addressing climate issues that threatened us long before they arrived. You're suggesting we use their technology against them, Morris observed. I'm suggesting we use what we've learned to rebuild better than before, Tessa corrected. Isn't that the point of surviving? The discussion lasted late into the night, ethical considerations, security protocols, implementation strategies. By dawn, a new initiative had been born, Project Reclamation. 3 weeks later, Tessa addressed her council again, this time with renewed hope. We've confirmed that the modified environmental restoration systems are functioning as designed, she reported. The first test area shows 87% reduction in radioactive particulates and full restoration of soil microbiome. A cheer erupted, the first sound of genuine celebration she'd heard since before the war. As the meeting concluded, Tessa stepped outside to watch the sunset. In the distance, green shoots were emerging from what had been scorched earth, nature reclaiming its domain with a little help from human ingenuity and, ironically, alien technology. Earth was still a war zone, damaged, scarred, forever changed. But humanity had drawn its line in the sand and held it. Now they would reclaim their world, wiser for having nearly lost it, determined never to be so vulnerable again. Tessa smiled as darkness fell. In the growing night, lights began to appear across the city, more than yesterday, a few more than tomorrow. Each one representing people finding their way home in a world being born anew.